Welcome to the Legacy Project. We are excited to spend time with you today. We have many other people that are going to be jumping on, but today my wife and I, this is a very special conversation because I'm going to get time. I'm going to be able to spend some time with my wife and business partner, talking on a topic that is tremendously important to both her and I, and it's the importance of communication and trust in building a legacy. And we're going to be talking about some things about how does this apply to families when they're communicating with each other and around estate planning. So I think you're going to really enjoy what today is going to be covered in today's conversation. We definitely want to engage you in conversation. So if you have questions, raise your hand, type them in, and we will make sure to open up your line or be able to ask your question and discuss it. But when we're talking about legacy and we're talking about communication and trust, it's so important to discuss what does that mean to a family and how do we as advisors help either facilitate communication and trust or break communication and trust. So we're going to be discussing that. For those of you that may be listening to this and recording in the future, or those of you that are on that want to see some of the previous Legacy Project conversations, you can go on the YouTube channel. You'll see it'll be rotating on the slides in front of you to be able to navigate. It's actually in front of you right now. But we're going to jump into today's discussion. So I'm going to hand it over to my wife and business partner, Danielle Reyes. Hope you're blessed by the conversation and just engage. We want it to be a conversation as much as possible, so feel free to comment. Feel free to ask questions, raise your hand, and we'll open up your mic. So Danielle, yours.
Thank you.
I think we're having some technical difficulties. Could you hear me? No. How about now? Hello, can you hear me? No? Can you hear me? I'm on. All right, so right now we're having some technical difficulties on our end, but I'm gonna start the conversation, and my wife Danielle will join in when technology makes it happen. But um, as many of you know, obviously during COVID, it's tough. It's tough because you're dealing with technology issues. Communication becomes harder because you have technology between you and that person. But this is a perfect example of technology and how it can create a breakdown in communication. But the same things happen when we're dealing with families. The same thing occurs, and I think she's back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
You gotta love technology. The second you said my name, actually everything just went black. I was like, so
Well,
I apologize. But
jump in.
like I was saying, or trying to say, was that I'm really excited about this conversation. It's close to my heart about families and really preserving how families can live and leave their legacy, and how we can, how we as a trusted advisors can help that. Another thing my husband had touched upon is as much engagement. We'd love for you guys to interact, jump in at any time. We want this to be free flowing and, just to have a great conversation. The first question that I have is, Chad, we talk about how most wealth doesn't make it to the second or even third generation. And the statistics are 70% doesn't make it to the second, 90% to the third, and 97 to the fourth. Would you share on why that occurs?
Well, I think many of us have over the years have heard these statistics. The Williams Group did a study of 3,250 families, and the reason why wealth did not make it to second, third, or fourth generation. And what I think is so key and it's so important is that a lot of the times we think as advisors, we think as the accountant, the attorney, the wealth manager, whatever role you're playing in that family's life, we think that the technical aspect of it is the reason why. And what happened was with this study of these 3,250 families is that a lot of it had to do with breakdown in communication and trust. And communication and trust, think about it in your own family. Communication and trust is not easy, whether it's with a husband with his wife, or a wife with his husband, or parents with the children, or your employees on your team. Communication is not easy. And then take this element of wealth. And a friend of mine said that wealth is a magnifying lens. If you have great communication, it magnifies your communication. But if you have poor communication, it actually magnifies the poor communication. So this study showed that majority of the people that are struggling and not able to transfer that wealth came down to these two areas: breakdown in communication and breakdown in trust. And Danielle, you hear me say this all the time when we work with families, is that breakdown in communication is the first part. If breakdown in communication goes on for too long, it turns into breakdown of trust. And then when breakdown of trust occurs, it's a very long path to healing that. So one of the things, and Danielle, obviously you're involved in it, but we own a company, a leadership and business coaching company. And the reason being is because communication and trust is so hard, especially when you're working with families and family dynamics. So getting in there to work with them is so key. And today I'm going to share some techniques and some stuff that you can use when you're working with the family, because it's not only, this statistic is not only just with the families, it's also the advisors. We as advisors have the ability to either help our clients communicate more effectively or not. And I've sat on side of tables with some very, very wealthy families, and I've sat there where the advisor just wants to rip apart the family, not necessarily intentionally, it's unintentional, but the advisor doesn't have the ability and the skill set to help facilitate good communication. So unfortunately, in their inability to do that, they create more of this ripple effect with that family. So if the family's unit wasn't communicating well to begin with, now it gets even worse. So that's the two main reasons: breakdown of communication and trust. And then the next reason is failure to prepare the next generation. And I personally believe that failure to prepare the next generation begins with communication and trust. Because if we can't communicate well and we can't build trust, how is the next generation going to want to listen to us? So that's the conversation we have with a lot of our clients and the advisors we work with. And
I'd love to jump in there and just share, one of our years ago, but one of our first clients, when we had encountered that, right, we were walking them through planning, and we started to realize that their stuff that was suggested by advisors that would help them to start to put their estate planning together and their legacy within their business and their family wasn't coming to pass because that there was a breakdown in trust and communication within the partners, which was family. So could you share a little bit about that and how, the success of being able to target those issues and the success story from it?
Yeah. So I think to that one client instant that you're referencing, I think there's an element of fear. Fear is something that we all deal with, and some people deal with it more than others. And right now where we are with everything that's going on in this world with COVID-19 and the elections and the riots and everything that else has been going on in this nation, we have a heightened level of fear. And in one of our other companies, in our coaching company, our leadership coaching company, our partner had to deal with some tremendous amount of fear. And I'm going to tell a quick story because I think it's so powerful of what happens when we address fear correctly, and then the ramifications when we don't. So our business partner in one of our other companies, he was at one point he was an FDNY, a fire department professional in New York. So he was part of the FDNY, and his ladder, his fire department was one of the first fire departments called to September 11th. And when he went into that building, at first they thought it was just obviously a plane hit it, and then he says, and when he tells the story, he says, well, when he was first in the fire truck on the way to the tower, he realized that, wow, this may just be a fire that's very high up on a 100-story building. But then when the second plane hits, he realizes this is no longer just a regular fire. This is a terrorist attack. And now there's certain protocols that he has to follow through to make sure that he's going through certain order of priority and protocol of how to handle this. Well, I tell you all that to say this: the building, the second tower collapses. It collapses onto the hotel in which him and a couple of people in his fire department, and he survives, obviously, thank God. But the amount of tremendous pressure that he goes through and tremendous stress that he goes through led him to eventually becoming a coach, a leadership coach. And he shares how stress turns into an anxiety. If you don't address that anxiety if you don't address that anxiety well, it eventually will turn into something called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the purpose of today is not to go through in depth the medical aspect of it, but I just want us to realize that stress for prolonged periods of time eventually turns into anxiety, and anxiety for prolonged periods of time eventually turns into PTSD. And a lot of the times when communication breaks down, it's because it's a stressful situation. Right. And we're not addressing that stressful situation immediately. So that then turns into family dynamics. It turns into a prolonged anxiety now at the family level, which then can turn into some further issues. So I want to share, to Danielle's question, I gave you a long story, but we're all dealing with this, especially the families right now that are going through a lot because of COVID-19, the impact it's had on the family. And now, how does that play out when they're making estate planning decisions? How does that play out when they have to make family decisions? And one of the families, this was pre-COVID-19, but one of the families was dealing with some issues. And for confidentiality purposes, I'll be very vague, but we're dealing with some issues within the family dynamic. And they were partners in a company, and we needed to get the buy-sell agreements drafted and executed. Now, what most attorneys and most advisors that were involved in that conversation before was just get the agreement signed, But what I knew about communication is that if you force someone to do something, they may do it, but it's going to bring a tremendous amount of resentment, a tremendous amount of emotional baggage that's going to bring it to the table during Christmas, during the holidays, that it's not going to go away. Because remember what I said before, is breakdown in communication turns into a breakdown in trust. When a breakdown in trust occurs, when a family dynamics, inside of the family dynamics, it's so difficult to mend because it's deeper wounds. So a lot of the times when we're working with the family, we always try to address the uncomfortable up front. And I would say this as advisors, whether you're a wealth manager, an attorney, an accountant, whatever role you play, a trust officer, if you don't feel comfortable, bring someone in that does feel comfortable, because when those issues don't get addressed, they just get bigger. And a lot of times we think by sweeping it under the rug, it goes away. It doesn't. Its ugly head sticks out at some point in the future. And when we're talking about legacy, when we're talking about families, thinking about the families that we serve, and some of them are 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 100. Some of the families are 150 years old. The business has been in the family for 150 years. But communication is so key. So I want to give you as advisors a couple of things that I've done to help myself work with these advisors. The first thing is, and feel free at any point to ask questions, because I don't want to come across as just the authority on it. I want to come across as giving things that have worked for us for 15, 18 years. And hopefully they'll work for you. Every family is different, every advisor is different, but one of the things that I've realized is people don't respond well when they're put in a corner. So if we're working and we're trying to create estate planning and buy-sell planning and all of this, and we put people in a corner, it doesn't usually work well, because people like options. And when you put them in a corner and you're attacking them, their defense mechanism comes out. And there's something that's scientifically proven, that when our bodies are put in stressful environments, our bodies release a chemical. Listen to what I'm about to say. Our body releases a chemical called epinephrine. It's a chemical that gets released in our bloodstream, that makes it harder for us to hear. So think about this. If we're trying to do estate planning, if we're trying to help this family through their legacy, and now there's this element of stress and anxiety being brought into these conversations, which I don't know about yourself, but every family that I've ever worked with, when we're helping them create their legacy and design their estate plan, I can tell that there's an element of stress just to begin with. So if we advisors are not helping reduce that stress, then what we're doing is we're increasing the stress. Now, what I know from my years of training and leadership is when stress increases, your body releases that chemical that I just mentioned, and it makes it harder for us to hear. So think about this now. Think about in areas where you have had breakdown in communication with another person. Usually it was around an area where there was some form of conflict. And that conflict, then your body releases this chemical that doesn't allow you to hear them. And now you're in a breakdown in communication mode. And if you remember what I said earlier, breakdown in communication, if it goes on for too long, eventually turns into breakdown of trust. And if the statistics are accurate, which I believe they are, that 90% don't make it to the third generation, 97% don't make it to the fourth generation, and breakdown in communication and trust is the main reason, then we need to realize as advisors that when that happens, when communication is breaking down, when we're working with the family, or when the family is working together, we have to figure out ways to reduce that stress, so that that chemical that gets released in the body doesn't get released as much, and the family can hear and process. So I share that to say is this: is as we're working with the families, our job as an advisor, if you're not comfortable with those conversations, then bring someone else in who can help bring that stress level down, so the family can hear and communicate more effectively. It'll help you obviously get them as a client, but it'll also help the family because they'll be able to more effectively work together. And brushing it under the rug, I've never seen that work. I know sometimes it's difficult conversations, but the difficult conversations is where we get breakthrough with the family if we're talking about their legacy. So I hope it was helpful. And Danielle, just take the conversation wherever you like.
Yeah, no, I'm just so passionate about this, and for for good reason. Is, you know, as advisors, we tend to, you know, we come with a solution to a problem, but sometimes there's that deeper problem. And I was a byproduct of that within my family, and all the things that, you know, we're sharing now. I wish we would have known sooner, you know, and that's for the advisors and their clients too, right? One of the things I say is increased awareness transforms lives, and this stuff is just so so important. So to just end that story that you were sharing before, is we were successfully able to execute some of the work that was needed with this family, just by breaking through those barriers that many advisors don't want to, you know, touch upon. I'd also like to share again with anybody who's on here, if you'd like to, maybe even if you don't have a question, but you have a story, or, you know, some other statistics or anything that, you know, join in the conversation at any point. We welcome it. And okay, I think you touched upon it a little bit, but I'm going to put it out there again. What would you say is the number one thing that would erode wealth as it is left to the next generation? Now, we are talking about communication, but what are some of the things, a theme that some of the families that we work with come to us with a concern on being able to help transfer that?
Well, I think one of the things that I've seen is when do I share what we're worth? And for the advisors on here that do estate planning, or the financial planners that are on here that are having conversations around estate planning, I think the key is this: when our clients do the planning, just hear me clearly for a moment. When our clients do the planning, they get confidence. Not their children, not the grandchildren. The client gets confidence because they say, okay, I did my wills, I did my trusts, I did my powers of attorney, I did all of my sophisticated planning. So the client gets trust. Now, it gets confidence. Now, hopefully that client's spouse was involved in that conversation so that they both have confidence. But this is where I think as advisors, we usually drop the ball. And I just want to encourage us to press in, get a little bit uncomfortable, but see what's possible for the families you serve, right?
Of course, a wife is shaking her head, right? Yes. Bring us in.
And when we're doing the planning with the family, husband and wife, let's just say as an example, they're getting the confidence after they've done all their planning. Our job, at least I think my job as the advisor working and serving that family, is to now take the confidence that matriarch and patriarch has and help them transfer that confidence to the next generation. Because a lot of the time when they don't do that, there's a breakdown of communication. What did mom and dad do? Why they do it? And what happens is, and most of the time, you could probably agree on this, most of the time our thought life takes over from what reality is. So all of a sudden now the kids or the grandkids start coming up with conclusions of what mom and dad did, because mom and dad never really clearly articulated that to the second generation or to their kids or grandkids. So what I always encourage is this: for the families that are comfortable working and sharing, bring the family in earlier into the conversation. If you want to have a legacy that continues to go on and live the legacy and leave a legacy, but some families are not comfortable with that. So maybe do your planning and then bring the family in later and share some of the planning that you did And sometimes you don't even need to share the dollar amount. I've had families that we've worked with that have said, Chad, I'm not going to share a dollar of how much we're worth, but I am going to share in the context of what we did, why we did it. And I said, that's perfect. And then I've had let me just finish 1 sec.
Sure.
Then I've had other families that have said, full disclosure, we can share everything. So what happens though is when we bring the next generation in around the table, and this is the key. This is a statement that has helped me tremendously. When we invite the next generation to the table, we now invite them into the conversation. And by doing that, we say, you matter, you're valuable, your opinion matters, and we did this planning for you, but we want you to understand more of how and what we did. And when you do that, I think you'll start seeing that the families you serve will start now really valuing communication more, because doing the planning helps them.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing the family into the conversation now helps increase communication, which then increase trust, which then gives that family a higher probability to make it to the second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. generations.
Oh, no, I love it. You actually touched upon, I kind of did almost cut in on that, but that's exactly what I was going to ask you to speak on. And I have proof here because I wrote it down, but is the family meetings, you know, bringing them together in the family meetings and what the conversation is there. And that's exactly it, is that the biggest thing that stops them from getting to the table with their family is, I don't want to share my wealth. I don't want to share numbers. I don't want to share, you know, they may not be ready for it. But what's great is, you know, walking them through it. But you answered my question before I could answer, before I could ask it. We do have somebody who's in our chat box here, and I'd love to open up his line. John, you're gonna hear unmute. You know, love to have you join us. So once you hear it, you may be muted on your end, so just check that as well. John?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes,
we
we
can
can.
hear you. Hi, John.
Awesome. Hi. Actually, I think you addressed my question. The situation I run into in estate planning is I often, just as you were saying, I see the confidence that the clients gain after doing their estate planning, the sense of relief, and I guess the confidence, you know, to move forward. But when I try to bring in their families into a family meeting, I find many, if not most, are hesitant to discuss anything but the really broad overview. Yes, we've done this planning. You know, we've done asset protection planning. This is how it will affect you in the future. And I guess I was just kind of, you know, commenting on that I find it difficult to really break through that barrier. I do encourage them to bring their children in early in the planning, but that is rarely successul. And so I just, you know, if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, so I will share this, that I had found something very similar to what you're echoing here. There's a question that I would ask when they do bring that up, John, and I think it may open up to a further conversation. And the question is just this: Mr. and Mrs. Client, I can feel, or I can observe, or I can see there's some level of hesitancy. Why is that?
Just expressing the curiosity.
So that question, why is that, will allow them, because sometimes, John, we're dealing with belief systems. I have a very simple philosophy, and I'll share this with you. Thoughts turn into beliefs. Beliefs turn into behaviors, and behaviors turn into results, right? So when people try to change the results, they try to change the results by behaviors. But I know that scientifically it's proven you don't change behaviors to change results. You change the thoughts that turn into the belief systems that change ultimately the results, right? So if we want to bring the families involved and get them more engaged in that conversation, what we're dealing with is a belief system issue. And that question that I just posed to you helps us understand what their belief system is. And their belief system may be, as a family, we just don't share what we've done. Okay, I could respect that. Why is that? And now we start understanding why that is. Well, just as an example, when I was younger, my parents were going through the Great Depression, and there was, they were dealing with a lot of issues around money. So we just never shared about money, and we just never discussed it. Okay, but are you going through that now? No. Now what we're doing, John, is we're getting them to address an issue, and they're making decisions based off of a belief system that no longer supports them. Maybe in the Great Depression that supported them because the family wasn't terrified that maybe they were going to be thrown out of their home or the bank was going to foreclose and call the note, right? But this is a different era. Banks don't call notes anymore the way that they used to. In the 1913, in 1929, they had the ability to call notes. The language of mortgage agreements now doesn't have the ability to call a note immediately. So traditionally, so I think if you ask that question and you ask a couple of more probing questions, you may get deeper into why they're not willing to have that conversation, and then you can coach them through that. But you and I both know that when they have that conversation, it helps increase trust, it helps increase communication, and it really gets that family to another level, and it helps break that generational issue of we don't talk about this. A lot of the times it's just based off of things that happened in someone's previous life that if we can ask a couple of really good questions, it may uncover Pandora's box.
Right. Yeah, John, as you had shared and my husband just said too, is we came across that a lot, and we really, we were concerned and passionate to get through that barrier. And I think, just like you said, a lot of the conversations between the advisor and the client themselves may need to occur before they're ready or feeling comfortable to sit down. But I think those conversations are needed and can make a difference.
Yeah,
that's great, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's something to develop, I guess, a discipline to get that into my practice, to be consciously aware of asking those questions.
Yeah, and John, one thing before you jump off this conversation, I call it professional courage, and I call it professional courage because these are the difficult conversations that most advisors are not willing to ask. But the advisors that are willing to ask these difficult conversations are the advisors that families stay with for a very long time. And I'll give you a real life example. I'm working with a family, a very wealthy family, and family dynamic issues, like every family. Listen, any family that's perfect, if someone says we have the perfect family, then they're lying to you right off the bat, and you can't trust a word that they say. Because every family has some form of a quirkiness to them, right? But this one family, right, was dealing with issues. And because there was a substance abuse issue, they didn't want to address it, nor address some of the buy-sell issues. And I said to this person, I said, listen, I know that this is hard, and I know that it's not going to be comfortable. But on the other side of it, if you don't address it, I guarantee that this is going to get uglier and worse in the future. I said, so if you're comfortable with it, I'm not saying that you need to navigate this, but allow us and our team and our communication person on our team and our legacy coach, allow us to navigate this, because this will only get worse. It's not going to get better. But if we address it now, at least we can say we have a good chance at trying to get through this. The other way, we have no chance, because eventually it's just going to rip apart the family if we don't address it head on. And guess what, John, I said this to tell you this story. This is a client who's one of our biggest raving fans. We've gotten so many introductions from this very successful family. And the reason being is we stood out because I was willing to have conversations that their other advisors just weren't willing to have.
Yeah, that's great.
So
All right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank-
you're welcome. Encouraged by you, man. Just keep it up and have those professional courage conversations.
Hey, thanks for doing.
Thank you, John. Okay. Anybody else? You know, as we shared, we definitely want you to join in on the conversation. Okay. So, Chad, really, we covered a lot here.
No, there's
Again, I'm just, what?
one point that I do want to bring out.
Go ahead.
The conversation around what we did from a planning perspective, similar to what John and I were just discussing, that conversation to transferring it to the next generation and having your kids or having their kids and grandkids involved in the conversation. Most people will follow a leader who's confident. So one of the things that we do in our practice is I gently and lovingly say, well, great, the next step is we want to bring now your kids into it. And I let them know the successful actions of families that have performed well, and I let them know unsuccessful actions of families that haven't performed well. So what I'd encourage is that when you, as the advisor, whether you're the financial planner, the accountant, the attorney involved in these conversations, just lead them. Just say, the next step is let's bring the family into the conversation. Let them say no. Instead of us having our preconceived notions that they don't want to, let them say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And then the next question becomes, I could see that you're a little bit hesitant. Why is that? And let them now tell you why. So they're telling you how you can coach them to get their family in the conversation.
So
And now what happens is, and many of you on this call know this, in the next 30 years, we're going to have the largest transfer of wealth in the history of our nation. In the history of our nation. And check this out. We as advisors and our successor advisors can be instrumental in helping those families with that transfer of wealth, but also being the advisor to be able to serve that family when that wealth is transferred to the kids or the grandkids. And most studies show that the advisor who serves the family will not be the advisor when that wealth transfers to the kids or the grandkids. Because if you're not involved in that intergenerational conversations, the second generation or third generation are going to want to bring their own advisors in. So if we can become the advisor to the family rather than mom and dad's advisor, that helps us build generational businesses, helps us have more profitable business models, and helps us now become a resource to a whole family rather than just one sector of that family.
So you just sparked me and reminded me of one of our stories. I love stories, and because you get to hear the success of the story of what the family went through and the success of it. And I want to talk about our clients that didn't have any children. They were brothers, didn't have any children, and we were able to, like, I don't want to use the word convince, we were able to walk them through speaking with their family and getting them at a table. And they were in their 70s, so their mindset was set on okay, when I die is when they're going to find out everything, and they had nieces and nephews that they cared for tremendously. If you could share that story, I think that was amazing, because by opening up a conversation, even not knowing that some of those family members, how they could play a piece in what they were doing, and then seeing the creativity around that table, I just think is such a great story.
Yeah, so Danielle, I'm going to share that just a couple of minutes on that story, and then I want to pivot to give the people on today's call a couple of tools that they can use to work specifically with the family. I want to give them
Love it.
very, very actionable items that they can use whether or not they work with us or not, they can use it very clear. But the story is this, is that it, like my wife said, it was a 70-year-old, two brothers who had created a pretty significant real estate portfolio, no children, and eventually the wealth was going to be left to their nieces and nephews. Off the top of my head, I think there was 5 or 6 maybe nieces and nephews. And when I shared with them about engaging and bringing the family in, their face was like this. We can't do that because in their culture, you don't share. You find out when I'm dead. And listen, it happened to be a nice life insurance opportunity. We wound up working with the family on the life insurance side of it. But I knew that there was more for this family. This family had more potential than me just selling them just a life insurance policy. So I said to the older sibling, I said, statistics show that wealth will not, 90% of that wealth will not get to the 3rd generation, 97 won't get to the 4th. And you shared with me that your goal is for this wealth to get to 3, 4, 5 generations because you built, you've given up your life in essence to build this. I said, but I don't know, and I can't say confidently that that's going to happen if we don't take some of these next steps. And I said, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring in your accountant, your attorney, and your sibling, and your nieces and nephews. And I'd like to share with them why we did what we did. And I'd like them to get a better understanding of what you did and the rationale behind it so they can understand your heart. So the older sibling was like, I don't know about this. I said, well, have I steered you wrong yet? They said, no. I said, if you can trust me on this, I think you're going to have some amazing breakthroughs. So he jumped on board. The other sibling, which is the younger sibling, was like, nope, I don't want to do it. And he just shut it down. And I said to him, I said, why? And we got into a conversation around why. And the why was more this, I'm not comfortable doing it. But I said, but tell me what you want to accomplish. And he said, well, I want to make sure the wealth gets to my nieces and nephews, and then they build it and they give it to their kids. I said, but if we don't take this next step, the likelihood of that happening is slim to none. Which then opened him up to a conversation to say, great. And then obviously I was working with his brother, who allowed us to then him to influence him to say, great, let's do this. And we wound up doing this family meeting. We brought the 2 siblings together. We brought the accountant and the attorney together, and then we brought the 6 nieces and nephews. And what happened from that meeting, when they started sharing why they did what they did and what the planning was and what their intentions were for the next generation and future generations, one of the things that came about was they had a niece who was someone who was really, they loved the niece, but the niece was not really involved in anything they did from a real estate perspective. But the niece, because of how their uncles were sharing, the niece really got engaged and said, Uncle so-and-so, I get to see real estate deals because I'm in the art world. And being in the art world, I get to see what's happening in that community before the real estate actually makes it to that community. And I could see opportunities where we can go into as a family and go into these communities and start really building up our portfolios there. And then in a couple of years, we'll start seeing the fruit of it, and we'll be able to get these values at a cheaper price. And all of a sudden, bam, the family was like, I got it. We're going to see things before it even hits the markets because my niece is in that art world, and that art world is getting access to where they were. That art world is getting access to what's happening in that community before the community even sees it, because a lot of it's underground art. So not illegal art, underground, meaning things that are happening behind the scenes when people are not seeing it, right? So it just took this family on a whole different trajectory, and the family started communicating and sharing, and all of a sudden now, this family, unfortunately, this one uncle passed away during COVID, but this family is now rallying together, having family meetings, looking for opportunities in other communities now to be able to invest in and living their uncle's legacy. The uncle had the courage to build it, and then the courage to be uncomfortable. But now the next generation has the ability to build it, and we're working on, on creating family governance around it and what that looks like. But that was all from two siblings who built a nice real estate portfolio, who then wanted to make sure that this got it to nieces, nephews, eventually their kids and great grandkids. So in wrapping, it's 12:47. Wanted to spend a couple of minutes just giving you some techniques and some tools that you can use in your practice. And feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to Danielle at WLGprivateclient.com. But these are some tools that we use. Leadership assessments. One of the things that has helped us tremendously get into deeper conversations with families is part of our process working with the family is we ask them to take leadership assessments, husband, wife, and children. And the reason why we ask them to do that is we know that communication and trust are the two main reasons why wealth doesn't get to the next generation. I want to address that issue right up front. So we'll work on a leadership assessment that tells us how they communicate, how they like to communicate, where their strengths are, where they would work most effectively. So that's the first thing. Utilize leadership assessments. The ones we use, I love the ones we use because it has a bar graph on it. So it shows you 9 areas, and it shows you their mission, their competency, and their style. And it shows you a bar graph so you can see actually where they lie, and then gives you a roadmap of how to more effectively work together with them. So that's the first thing, leadership assessment. The second thing is this, is we have a technique I call the praise sandwich. It's a technique that allows me to address an issue with that family, but I sandwich it with praise. And I'll give you an example. Let's say it's an issue with the family dynamics. I say to the client, I say, Mr. So-and-so, you've built wealth, you've built a lot of it, and you obviously have done it really well. So I don't know if I can teach you much there. I think you've nailed it. You've amassed this tremendous business, tremendous real estate. But I think, now watch this, that's the praise. Now I'm going to give the meat, constructive criticism. But where I think there's room for improvement is how we communicate what you've done with your kids and your grandkids. Because I think if we communicate that better, it's going to give you such a higher likelihood of making sure that this wealth goes across generations. So I did praise, the sandwich, and now the praise. I never ended on that. Now I give the last praise. And I say, and honestly, now I only say it if it's authentic. If it's, I'm not going to say something just to say it because I lose my credibility. So everything I'm saying to this client is it's in authenticity. I'm not trying to manipulate them. I'm trying to be authentic to help serve the family. So what I say at the end is I say, Mr. So-and-so, I just want to let you know how honored I am that you've given me the ability to sit at this table and have a seat at your family's table. And I don't take that for granted. I'm honored that you've allowed me that. And I just can't wait to continue working with you. But now we address the real issue. We're addressing the issue that you're not communicating with your children and grandchildren. And I'm honored to be sitting at the table. And I really value this relationship. I call that the praise sandwich. So that's another tool that we use. So the first one is the leadership assessments. Second one is the praise sandwich. And the third one is a tool that we utilize that allows us, I call it the 10-80-10 principle. Okay. It's a lot of these families that are successful, they don't want to be involved in every aspect of this. So the 10-80-10 principle says this. It says this. I want to have my clients involved in the 10% upfront. I want to have the advisors and the teams and the people that are doing the planning involved in the 80%. And then I want to have the family and my client and their family involved in the back 10%. I don't want to put all this heavy lifting on them in the middle, because that's where the breakdown in communication happens. I want to work behind the scenes to make it seem simple to them so that we can work on the 10 and 10 side to really address the issues that that family needs to address. So it's the 10-80-10 principle. So those are the 3 tools that I think you can use to more effectively work and serve the families that you're working with. It's leadership assessments. Reach out to us, call us. I'd love to share more of what we're using, the tools we're using. The second one is the praise sandwich. And the third one is the 10-80-10 principle. We want our clients involved in the front 10%, the last 10%, and we want our teams to do the heavy lifting in between on that 80%, to make it as easy as possible for that family to be able to move forward and to communicate what they've done with their future generations. So I hope that was valuable. I'm gonna hand it over to my wife and go from there.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I just want to speak for a quick moment on that 10-80-10 rule and how effective, and the feedback that we got from clients and those around us, that when we use that tool, because it is where the advisor, we're lifting that heavy weight for them, and what has gotten them the success to that point can't get them to the next point, and that's where we come in. So I love those 3 tools. Thank you.
I just want to share this one quick quote. The same level of thinking that brought them to this success will never take them to the next level of success. And if we come back to what I shared earlier, thoughts turn into beliefs, beliefs turn into behaviors, and behaviors turn into results. So if we want a different result, we got to change the thinking that then changes the belief, that then changes how they behave, which is the actions, which then will change the result. But we can't change results if we just want to continue doing the same old mindset.
Love it. And you know what? It's just such a small little piece that we play, but it can make a really big impact and really help these families to live and leave their legacy, which is just really so exciting. I don't believe there's anybody else that has any questions or input at this time. So where do you want to take it?
Before we wrap up, I just want to encourage each advisor that listens to this or is on today's call. Take these conversations and have these conversations with other advisors. And you can get all these recordings on the Legacy Project YouTube channel. Every single one of them since April that we've done is on there. And we put it on there so that you as advisors can bring other advisors around the table and talk about this stuff. And you don't necessarily have to be the expert on it. And there's so many resources outside of just us and what we do. There's so many different people that have such high levels of expertise, but it's a great conversation starter. So I just want to share this with you. The goal of Legacy Project was to start the 3C movement. It's conversation, collaboration, and community. So community, collaboration, and conversation. So take these recorded videos, bring them into your city, at your conference room, obviously making sure you're preparing yourself for COVID and everything is done correctly. But bring it into your conversation, your conference room. Bring 2, 3, 4 other advisors that want to serve families at this level. Order some breakfast, spend an hour and a half together, and see where that conversation goes. The conversations that we're having with other advisors that we work with one-on-one, and it's bringing tremendous opportunities for all of us to serve families at a higher level. And that's that community side, that's the collaboration side, and this part is the conversation side. So we're encouraged to be with you guys. Our next Legacy Project is on November 19th. Join us, share with other advisors that are in your network. They can register for it, but just excited to be with you. I thank you for your time. I don't take that as I try to utilize this time as effective as possible because I know people's time is so valuable, and I appreciate that you invested it with us.
Yeah. Speaking of, I just want to share a comment, and I want to thank Richard. He said, appreciate you sharing. Note to self, listen more intently. And how true is that?
Yeah.
That's so good. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So our clients that say the words, if we ask the right questions, we'll know what's here in their heart. Also,
And just to speak on another moment of what my husband just said, you know, wanting to create, we had some advisors that told us that it's hard to get like-minded, legacy-minded advisors together. Something like this is, like he said, you know, bring them in for, you know, ask some people around you to come in, sit in your office, sit in your conference room and watch this together. You know, like for the next one, we also have them on YouTube. And after you watch, you know, create that conversation and you'll start to see the ones that are drawn to this message. We say all the time, people are either going to be drawn or repelled, and that's okay. If we could find those that are drawn to this message, we could really make an impact and really share what legacy is really about. And it's better together. As we've been hearing through this COVID time, right? But it's true. It's better together to collaborate and really make an impact in the clients and relationships that we have around us. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Have a great day. Enjoy, and you know, just continue. This is a movement, and it takes a lot of courage. But we're on this journey together. We haven't perfected it. We're just doing our best. But let's continue serving the families and doing our best. God bless you guys. We'll see you on next month's Legacy Project. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.